Welcome to ABC News Live. I'm Aaron Katersky in New York. We're following this hour the special counsel Robert Mueller wanting to talk to President Trump about obstruction of justice. And one of the most successful college football coaches in the country has been sidelined. We'll get into that with our friends at ESPN after this hour's headlines.
55 sets of remains that North Korean officials say are those of Americans killed in the Korean War are now in Hawaii. Vice President Mike Pence.
Today, they are known but to God. But soon we will know their names.
3 accused Ukrainian hackers are now facing charges in the U.S. Federal prosecutors say they helped steal information on more than 15 million credit cards.
The White House may ramp up tariffs against China. The Trump administration has proposed 10% duties on about $200 billion in Chinese goods. Now the president says he wants the U.S. Trade Representative to consider more than doubling those tariffs to 25%. The Trump administration has eased rules on short-term health insurance coverage, allowing insurers to offer cheaper plans with limited coverage for up to 3 years. Under the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare, those plans were limited to a few months.
CBS now says it's hired a pair of law firms to investigate the sexual harassment allegations against CEO Les Moonves.
8 years after pulling out of the country in a fight over government censorship, Google may be ready to move back into China. The Wall Street Journal says the company is testing a new mobile version of its search engine, which would comply with China's strict rules about content.
The special counsel Robert Mueller has now, ABC News has learned, narrowed the scope of his focus. He's narrowed the scope of the questions that he would like to ask President Trump in an interview. But part of that scope includes something that has drawn the ire of the president and the White House. And so let's turn to the White House with ABC's Karen Travers. The special counsel wants to ask the president about obstruction, and the president didn't quite like hearing that, Karen.
No, he did not, Aaron. This recent development certainly set President Trump off on Wednesday morning on quite a tweet storm. The president was venting about the Russia probe, about Paul Manafort being on trial, and he also had this very aggressive tweet. He writes, quote, "Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further." Now, we have learned that the president was so upset at hearing that obstruction of justice would be something that Robert Mueller wants to talk to him about if they do sit down for that interview. That prompted that aggressive tweet. Well, Aaron, that tweet also sent the White House into a very aggressive damage control mode afterwards. You had the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, say the president used the word should end the witch hunt, not must end the witch hunt, saying it's not a directive from President Trump. Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, yesterday said this was a presidential opinion, not an order. Now, it's notable that over the last year and a half, we've certainly been told that tweets from the president are official statements. Now, they're also just opinions, not orders.
But Karen, if you tell your daughter you should clean your room, isn't your expectation that her room will be clean?
That's what I'd like to see as the end result there, but I guess you could say, well, you didn't tell me I absolutely must clean my room. It's just a suggestion, which is certainly what the president's team was trying to say yesterday. I think, though, when you get back to that obstruction of justice question that Mueller would like to talk to the president about, you know, there has been ongoing negotiations for several months now between the president's legal team and the Mueller team about what a possible conversation could look like. And we're now learning that Mueller would like to talk to the president in person. He would also like to question him in writing. Yesterday, the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, told reporters that they had submitted about a week and a half ago a fairly narrowed list of questions to Mueller and his team. He says they've gotten back their response from the special counsel's office. They're going over it now. He wouldn't give details as to where this stands, but Aaron, we have heard the president say many times over the last couple of months he wants to sit down with Mueller. He says he absolutely is willing to do it. He has nothing to hide. He says he's done nothing wrong. But he's always said he'll do that on the advice of his legal team, and for now, they have certainly indicated they don't want him to do it. Aaron, most lawyers here around the country would say, do not do this interview. You could only put yourself in legal jeopardy.
Too much peril. And as those negotiations for a potential interview go on, Karen, President Trump has heard from Kim Jong-un in the form of a letter.
The White House says that he received a letter from Kim Jong-un yesterday. And last night, overnight, the president tweeted about this. He said, thanking Kim Jong-un for keeping his word and returning the remains of fallen U.S. service members who were killed in the Korean War. We had Vice President Mike Pence in Hawaii yesterday for a ceremony greeting those remains that still have to be tested. It's a pretty lengthy process to determine whether or not they are, in fact, human remains. And if they are they any fallen U.S. service members? It's a difficult process to identify them, but they did have a very nice ceremony yesterday in Hawaii. The White House says that this letter from Kim Jong-un to the president yesterday is a follow-up, a continuing correspondence between the two leaders, and a commitment to working forward on that conversation that they began in Singapore back in June.
ABC's Karen Travers with us from the White House. Our thanks to Karen. And we're going to turn next to Alexandria, Virginia, where it is day 3 of the Paul Manafort trial, the first trial involving special counsel Robert Mueller. ABC's Catherine Faulders is there with us. And Catherine, so far on display, the best of what money, albeit maybe tainted money, can buy.
Right, Aaron. Prosecutors are trying to prove that Manafort cheated on his taxes through his opulent lifestyle and that it was financed from foreign accounts. Now, yesterday, the testimony from witnesses focused just on that. You had the manager of a men's clothing store testifying that in 5 years, Manafort spent $929,000 on suits alone. You had a contractor who testified and said that Manafort was one of his best clients. He always paid his bills on time, but said he performed over $3 million in renovations on Manafort's properties in the New York area. And I know we talked about this before, that our sources tell us that witnesses have been instructed not to use the word Trump. Well, that word came up in that testimony from that contractor, not directly related to Trump, but he said he did work on Manafort's residence in Trump Tower. Now, also, you have the prosecution throwing into evidence this $15,000 ostrich jacket. You have over $1 million in clothing, multiple homes, cars, rugs, watches, a $21,000 watch from the House of Bijan, Aaron. But this is really starting to irritate Judge T.S. Ellis. He got very testy yesterday in the court multiple times, raised his voice, and he said, quote, "We don't prosecute people for being rich." He's looking for the prosecution to, in fact, prove that a crime was committed here, and we might get more of that detail today. The witnesses who will appear today are bookkeepers, tax preparers, so we should expect to see a bit more of that detail, and maybe the judge will be slightly happier.
Right, because sartorial choices aside, the onus is on the prosecutors to prove that Paul Manafort schemed to hide this money from the tax man. And the one person who may be most able to tell the jury about that is Rick Gates, who ended up cooperating with the special counsel. He up today?
That's right, Aaron. And I will say that what all those witnesses had in common yesterday is that they did say that Manafort paid via foreign wire transfer, mainly from Cyprus. But back to Rick Gates, yes, he is the one who would know all about this, who would know the details. He was Manafort's deputy for some time. And there was a little bit of a question about this yesterday, where the prosecutors somehow opened the door to the fact that maybe he won't show up. They said he may or he may not, referring to if they would call him as a witness. They said they're constantly still reevaluating the evidence as it comes in. The judge said yesterday that was a surprise to him, that they weren't thinking of calling Rick Gates. However, the prosecution inside this court behind me this morning said that they do still expect, they have every expectation to still call Rick Gates as a witness, Aaron. And given how much he knows, this will likely be the most important day in court when Rick Gates shows up.
ABC's Catherine Faulders with us from Alexandria, Virginia, the ongoing trial of Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign manager. I want to turn next to Urban Meyer, the wildly successful coach of the Ohio State football team. He has been put on paid leave over questions about what he knew about potential domestic abuse involving one of his longtime assistant coaches. Rhys Davis with our sister network ESPN joins us now from Atlanta. Rhys, our thanks to you. Let's start with the allegations themselves. What is it that Urban Meyer is accused of knowing about?
There were a couple of incidents involving Zach Smith and his wife as it pertained to domestic violence. One of them occurred in 2009 when Zach Smith worked for Urban Meyer at the University of Florida. Meyer has acknowledged being aware of that and urged the Smiths to get counseling. They were pretty early in their marriage. In 2015, there was apparently another incident about which Urban Meyer said at Big Ten Media Days about a week ago that he had not been made aware of until just before those meetings. That has now been called into question due to some reporting by Brett McMurphy, which showed some text message exchange between Courtney Smith, the survivor of the domestic violence situations, and Shelley Meyer, who's Urban Meyer's wife. Part of those text messages said Shelley Meyer said that she was going to tell Urban Meyer about what was going on in the Smith household, and then Meyer later said that he was not aware of any situation other than 2009 or had been made aware of it late. So that is the part that has been called into question right now, whether Urban Meyer kept Zach Smith on staff knowing that he had been involved in some domestic violence allegations after the initial situation in 2009.
Rhys, how surprising is this given Meyer's reputation in college football? He's been around scandal before, if not directly implicated.
I think it's more of a surprise because of the culture in which we are right now, where victims of both domestic violence and sexual abuse have been empowered to come forward, and they've been taken seriously and listened to. And there have been so many situations when people in positions of authority, whether it be coaches or CEOs or business leaders, have paid the price for not treating those claims in a proper fashion. That part of it, to me, is surprising. I don't think, based on my relationship and knowledge of Urban Meyer, I don't think that he's an evil person who would have no regard for any type of victim. However, it's, based on what we know at the moment, the most logical conclusion to draw is that he erred or did not show proper judgment or proper appreciation for the gravity of the situation. And because of the mandate for people in positions of leadership in college athletics to report such issues, not only if they pertain to Title IX and involve students, but also if they involve members of their staff. I think that has put him in a difficult situation. It's the reason that he's on paid administrative leave right now as Ohio State looks to see whether he can weather this storm and continue as head coach, or whether they're going to be forced to part ways with a wildly successful coach, one of the most successful coaches in college football history.
Yeah, and Ohio State has been grappling with this issue unrelated to football about who knew what when it comes to different kinds of abuse. So in many ways, Urban Meyer is the victim of bad timing.
Yes, I would maybe hesitate in terms of using the word victim, but he certainly, the timing is less than ideal for him given the other things that have gone on at Ohio State, and even looking elsewhere in the Big Ten with what happened at Michigan State with Larry Nassar, unrelated situations, or even the Penn State scandal with Jerry Sandusky. But all of those things, I think, tie into the heightened awareness of issues that are away from the field, and how it is incumbent on people in leadership positions now to handle those types of situations properly, even if it's just notifying authorities, letting the administrators know, or making changes on your staff to make sure that people who are involved in these types of things are no longer involved with the young men or young women, as the case may be, playing a particular sport.
Rhys Davis of our sister network ESPN, our thanks to you there in Atlanta. We are starting to hear the remarkable survival stories from the plane crash in Mexico, and ABC's Victor Oquendo is in Mexico City, where that flight was headed. He's been able to speak to some of those who were on board.
Aaron, investigators hope to learn a lot from those black boxes, which they say were recovered in perfect condition, and from the pilot, who's now in stable condition. Let's show you this new video. It shows the intense moments before that doomed Aeromexico flight took off. Strong wind gusts and hail hammering the aircraft. the plane crashing during takeoff, filling the cabin with smoke, 99 confused passengers and 4 crew members racing to safety before flames overtook the jet. Remarkably, everyone survived. The passengers that we spoke with all have their own unique stories of survival. They were seated in different parts of the plane, but they all had the same question. Why did the plane take off in that storm? And when asked about why they took off with such bad weather, the director of Aeromexico said that every plane needs clearance from the control tower, but added that several factors could be involved in this crash. Aaron?
ABC's Victor Oquendo from Mexico City. And there is a possible break in the case of a missing college student, Molly Tibbetts. There's a possible sighting of her that authorities are now exploring. And ABC's Alex Perez joins us for more on that. Alex, how seriously are the authorities taking this?
Hey, Aaron, this is the first possible development in this story since Molly vanished July 18th. Someone spotting her and calling police, believing they spotted her and calling police. But authorities are being very careful right now not to call this a break in the case per se. Authorities in Kearney, Missouri, which is where she was spotted, about 200 miles from where she vanished, say they responded to this call. They collected whatever information they needed from witnesses, the witness who was there, and they turned that over to investigators in Iowa. But authorities in Iowa at this point haven't commented on that information that they received. So it's really unclear how significant this development is right now. What we do know is that authorities in Iowa, including the FBI, continue their investigation, their search for Molly Tibbetts. It's been about 2 weeks now since she vanished, and at this point, they really have not provided any significant information as to where exactly she might be. As you might imagine, for her family, they are desperate for answers. This has been excruciating for them. She was actually supposed to leave on a trip, a vacation, to the Dominican Republic, where she was going to be standing up in a wedding as well. Today, her family hoped that they would have found her and that she would be back and be able to go on that trip. Unfortunately, that has not happened yet. Her mother talked a little bit about the importance of today and that trip. Let's take a quick listen to what her mother had to say.
I'm thinking that that's that August 2nd deadline where I want to get that little girl and Dalton and Blake and Allie on a plane and, go enjoy yourselves in the Dominican. I can't stand that these people are having a wedding and she's supposed to be the maid of honor.
So now loved ones tell us that wedding has been put on hold, postponed, as they await news about Molly, hoping that they're going to figure out, learn something very soon on her whereabouts. But authorities say right now they're zeroing in on information from that Fitbit that she was wearing, they believe she was wearing when she was running. They're hoping that they can garner some sort of GPS information, tracking information that will give them an idea of where exactly she was or where she may be headed. But, people are growing really desperate right now, especially family members. They want to get some answers, and with each day that passes, it becomes more and more difficult. Aaron?
Yeah, Alex, because it's going on now, 3 weeks? And as you say, the evidence just hasn't been there.
Yeah, authorities are working this case around the clock. They say they have about 40 investigators almost every day working on it. There's a reward now. It's $30,000 right now. That reward is expected to grow later today and continue to grow. They're hoping someone's going to remember something they saw, and they're going to call police, and they're going to get that one clue that they need to really crack this case and figure out what happened to Molly Tibbetts. She was supposed to start her sophomore year at the University of Iowa in just a couple of weeks, so they're hoping they're going to get some answers pretty soon.
Yeah, here's hoping. ABC's Alex Perez, our thanks to you. We want to turn next to Houston, Texas, and ABC's Marcus Moore, where there is an incredible story of a cardiologist, a prominent cardiologist who was murdered, and this may be a murder some 20 years in the making. Marcus, good to see you. This is an incredible motive that the authorities have now uncovered.
But it really is, Aaron. I have not heard of a case like this where a suspect is accused of murdering someone, a physician, over a grudge that has been going on, police say, for 2 decades. The suspect in this case lived in the house just behind me here in Houston. His name is 62-year-old Joseph Pappas, and police say that he killed Dr. Mark Houseconnect, who's a prominent cardiologist here in Houston, after his mother died on the operating table some 20 years ago. That is the working theory that police are chasing right now, and they actually executed a search warrant at this house this week. And that information about the 20-year-old passing of his mother, that came, Aaron, from a tip that police received after putting out a call and releasing a number of surveillance videos, hoping someone would recognize the suspect who was captured in those videos. Well, sure enough, someone recognized Mr. Pappas, or they say that that's him in the video, and they also relayed information that his mother used to be a patient of Dr. Houseconnect, and that she apparently passed away on the operating table. And again, it's an astonishing development in this case, Aaron, that police have been investigating since July 20th, rather, when Dr. Houseconnect, Friday morning, he was riding his bicycle to work, and police say he was targeted.
Now, any sign at all of this Pappas character, where he might be?
Right now, Aaron, they don't know where he is. The police have said that they believe that he is still using, or may have still been using, the bike, a 10-speed bike that he allegedly was seen on moments before the murder happened, and also in the moments following. But at this point, they don't have, at least publicly, they're not saying where they think he might be, or if he's still here in the Houston area. They have said, however, Aaron, that he's in great shape. He's incredibly fit, and they say that he rides extensively. So he has this mode of transportation, this bicycle, that they have been looking for. And certainly the search does continue, that manhunt well underway. And they have urged people who happen to see him not to approach him, but instead to call police, because they consider him armed and dangerous, but also say that he may be suicidal, Aaron.
Unbelievable story. ABC's Marcus Moore there in Houston. A murder 20 years in the making. Just incredible. Want to catch you up on the weather now? ABC's senior meteorologist Rob Marciano's here.
Hey, Aaron, great to be with you today. More in the way of flooding across the eastern quarter of the country. Pictures out of Vienna, Virginia. This is just outside of Washington, D.C., where a swiftwater rescue happened. Rainfall there a little bit, but already saturated from last week's flooding situation. And a similar setup, stubborn high pressure offshore, flow pumping up the tropical moisture, hitting the Appalachians, and then that stubborn front, flash flood watches posted from Florida all the way up into central New York. And the flow continues tomorrow with that front slowly moving to the east. So another 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 inches in spots, and some of these areas do not need any more rainfall. In the west, they could desperately use some of this rain, but that's not going to happen. Look how Half Dome in Yosemite National Park is obscured by the smoke there. That's still closed through at least Sunday with the Ferguson fire. And the Carr fire in Redding still burning, of course. Air quality away from these fires is really bad, unhealthy for a lot of sensitive groups, and in some cases just making it difficult to breathe. Windy conditions next couple days increase the fire threat, but bring in cooler weather, but then more heat expected as you go toward the middle part of next week in Redding. And it's just the beginning of August now, and really the beginning, technically, of fire season, so we've got a long way to go. Aaron?
ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano, our thanks to you. For more on the forecast and weather conditions all around the country, or more on any of the stories that we've discussed here today, download the ABC News app. Check us out on abcnews.com. I'm Aaron Katursky in New York. Thanks for watching ABC News Live.